What a great event for students here at the Smartforce Student Summit at the International Manufacturing Technology Show. This Smartforce Student Summit, of course, being powered by AMT. My name is Matt Kirkner. I am your host for the Tech Ed Podcast, and we have spent the entire week meeting some of the most innovative, aggressively evolving people in the world of technical education. And today's guest on the Tech Ed Podcast, as we live stream on YouTube, is no exception. He is Dr. Tony Schmitz, the professor of mechanical, aerospace, and biomedical engineering at the University of Tennessee-Knoxville. He also has a really important role at America's Cutting Edge. We're going to learn all about that today on the Tech Ed Podcast. But let's start out with America's Cutting Edge. Tony, first of all, thank you so much for being with us on the Tech Ed Podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us about America's Cutting Edge. What is its mission? What is its work? What are you up to?
So America's Cutting Edge has two primary missions. One is on the research and development side. The other's on workforce.
Okay.
So what we're talking about today is the workforce effort, and it's about adding people to machine tools in that industry.
Fantastic. So both research, and that's got to be really, really interesting in terms of finding new technologies, finding new applications for subtractive manufacturing, for CNC as well. And then the part that you're so very involved in, and it's almost the whole need and the whole reason for the Smartforce Student Summit, is it not? Is this need for talented workforce, talented machinists, talented operators, talented designers in the world of CNC machining. Am I getting that right?
You got it right. We're trying to address that entire ecosystem, from folks who run machines to folks who design machines to folks who are going to run the companies that sell next generation machines.
And I know that ecosystem involves not just your organization and not just your educational institution, but tons and tons of partners that are involved in this. So tell us a little bit about some of the partnerships and the organizations that are influencing the work that you're doing.
Yeah, tremendous network. It starts, of course, with the support and the funding that makes it all possible. That's from the Department of Defense Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment Program,
okay,
or IBAS.
Yep.
Great leadership from Adele Ratcliffe and her team. And so the entire effort is focused at Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Where is that?
That's in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Okay.
They're a Department of Energy laboratory.
Okay.
And then I have a joint faculty appointment there, so I spend half my time there. That's the focus of the research and development efforts. IACME, the Composites Institute, one of the Manufacturing USA institutes,
sure,
is leading the workforce development effort.
Okay.
And so I developed content for the ACE program, and then they've managed that and have built it into this big effort that we have with an entire network. We have community colleges, other universities, trade organizations have all kind of rallied behind this effort.
Industrial employers as well, or are they separate from this?
Absolutely. They are our customers, and so they inform how we're doing this training. And I think we're now on the edge of them understanding what we can offer and them wanting to bring it in as their own training program when they onboard new people.
Interesting. So is it the machine tool builders? Is it the control designers and developers? Is it the actual machining, CNC machining companies, or all of the above?
I think the big partners initially are those who want to employ machinists and manufacturing engineers and everybody in that area. But I am making inroads to machine tool builders as well.
Yep.
And they're getting involved. So that's very exciting.
And I think one of the things that people don't necessarily realize when they look at the world of machining, especially contract machining, we think about manufacturers and big names come to mind, right? Companies like Intel and General Motors and Volkswagen and Tesla, and those are the names that everybody knows. But really, the machining world, and especially contract machining, meaning companies that are building parts for other applications for other companies, they're really disparate, and a lot of small to mid-sized businesses in that ocean of manufacturers. Do you see both the large OEMs and the smaller contract manufacturers as being part of your ecosystem?
We absolutely do. In fact, through AMT, we've helped to track where and who are these companies. And by and large, this is an industry that's run by small companies.
Sure.
30,000 machine shops
right
in the U.S., right? So we want to make this accessible to those folks as well as the large OEMs that you discussed.
Got it. So it sounds like just a great group of educators, of industrial employers, large and small, And your influence on a lot of this, to your point, has been on the workforce side and on the design and the development of the actual curriculum, the learning applications, and so on. And so one of the things, as I understand it, that's really unique about your delivery model and your approach is the combination of online and in-person learning. Walk us through the experience. So I'm a learner and I'm going through this process. What does that feel like to me, both the combination of the online learning and the hands-on skills?
Yeah, so let's start with the online. It's about 6 hours of content that's online, and it's at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you finish each module, there's a quick quiz just so we can assess completions and learning and report back the outcomes.
Sure.
But the intent of the content that I developed was to be inclusionary, not exclusionary.
Okay.
So you can enter into this content having no knowledge about machining or even what CNC means.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But there are multiple modules, and some of those modules are relevant to folks who might have been in the industry their entire lives.
Okay.
Specifically, my particular research area, is vibrations, machining dynamics,
Right.
chatter.
Yep.
Right. How that influences the machining parameters you select in the software.
Yep.
So I've had multiple industry professionals who say, we did the training just so I could learn more about chatter, what causes it, what do I do
Sure.
when I see it, not,
absolutely.
other than the tribal knowledge that exists. And so that, I think that's been powerful, and we carry that over into the in-person training. So we've had everything from high school students to a great story was a father and son team who were third-generation CNC machine shop owners.
Okay.
And they came together because they said, we want to learn more about chatter.
Okay.
And that's part of the in-person training that we do. We've partnered with MSC Industrial Supply. So they have a new product that they're rolling out through their metalworking specialists called MillMax.
Okay.
That's part of our training.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been very successful, and that cooperation is no small part of it.
So did I hear you right? The online portion of it, 6 hours of learning, is that correct? And
That's
is
correct.
It a little bit of, I was always, number one, a hands-on kinesthetic learner, so I love the hands-on part. We'll talk about that in a moment. But number two, I'm a big fan of what I call lean learning. In other words, let's figure out where the knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. And it kind of feels like that content, whether I've been a machinist or worked in the CNC world for several decades, or whether I'm somebody that's new to CNC, it's going to meet me where I am, and there's going to be value there. Is that right?
That's the idea. I've been an educator for 25 years.
Right.
And I think it's only been at this point in my career, and having watched people learn for so long and seen what worked and what didn't, that enables me to do something like this.
Right.
And it's also the time in my career where the spotlight is off me. I just want to help the industry, and this is an effort that I probably wouldn't have done as a young man, because it's not the research that gets you noticed at a university.
Absolutely.
But it has equal value, and I've enjoyed it so much.
I'm going to guess you and I are roughly the same age, plus or minus a few years. Maybe you're a little bit younger than me. I don't know, but same thing. I spent my whole career in manufacturing, leading and running manufacturing operations, several of them with pretty significant and extensive CNC capabilities and machining capabilities. So I'm certainly no stranger to that part of it.
Right.
But then 7 years ago, when we sold one of our last manufacturing company, and I did what I call dedicating my life to my career to the securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent, it really is a fun part of the career, isn't it? When you're not that I'm not so competitive, not that I still don't like to make a little bit of money, but that's not the main driver. It's really there's other aspects of this that are important. It sounds like you reached the same spot.
Yeah, no question. I think when you find that you can make an impact in a new way, it's very exciting.
Right.
And we're seeing that happen.
So
it's been great.
Let's talk a little bit more about that impact now on the hands-on learning side. So you mentioned you've got the online portion, the 6 hours of learning, and then you talked about chatter, you talked about vibration. We could have a whole conversation about how technology is evolving in vibration analysis and detection and predictive analytics, and probably a topic for another podcast. But once I get to the hands-on portion, you say, okay, I've got this information, or this learner rather, who wants to learn more about chatter and wants to learn more about removing variation from the manufacturing process. They come to the hands-on side. Is it a lot more flexible then? Did I hear that right? You can kind of pick and choose what it is you want to learn about, or go deeper on the hands-on?
So the hands-on, we call it a boot camp.
Okay.
It's 1 week long.
Got it.
About 8 hours a day.
Okay.
So we go Monday to Friday naturally. Within an hour of arriving at the training location, you're machining your first part.
Okay, wow.
So our intent was to get you engaged right away. And there's 4 parts that we machine Monday through Thursday.
Okay. Manual or CNC or both?
All CNC.
Okay.
And so I'll talk about how we organize the camp in just a moment. But with those 4 parts, then they are assembled into an oscillating piston air engine.
Okay.
Each student then finishes the week with this working air engine. We run it with compressed air.
Sure.
And then on Friday, our pinnacle of the week is we have NCAA style bracket competition.
All right.
For assembly time.
Oh, very cool.
Right. And so it's a lot of fun, and there's a prize at the end. But what we're really doing there is identifying the importance of tolerances,
right,
and fit, because there's no seals in this oscillating piston air engine, and so how it goes together matters quite a lot for the final performance. And so we're able to talk about fundamental topics in machining and metrology and assembly and statistical process control and all those things that surround CNC machining during that week.
Well, and I'll add to that lean manufacturing and waste elimination. If you're showing folks here, I mean that's alive and well and real when you get to manufacturing, right? And tolerances and fit. These are all things that play hugely into being able to create a efficient manufacturing process, and it feels like that's a big part of the result of this as well.
That's right. So what are we doing? We're trying to get people to the point at which I know more about this industry and be able to make an informed decision. Do I want to make this my career?
Sure.
And I think we've been successful in doing that.
So let's go deeper on some of those outcomes now. It is certainly awareness, and we all know that especially a high school student, a middle school student, the number one influencer on their career pathways is what did I like doing when I was in middle school and high school? What were my experiences? What was I taught how to do? And being taught a lot of things. One of the things that we ask a lot of our guests on the Tech Ed podcast, in fact, all of them, and we'll pose this question to you later on, is what advice would you have for a high school sophomore? And it's amazing how many of them touch on this idea that experience a lot of different things, and just because you're going through a 40-hour boot camp in CNC and learning about CNC machining, it's not a life sentence. It's an exposure. It's a decision, and it's as important as a lot of folks have said. To figure out what I don't want to do is just as important as to figure out what I do want to do, and you can save a lot of time and money doing that earlier in your educational pathway. But talk about some of the other outcomes. So we're getting exposure, we're getting interest. Are there marketable hands-on skills and competencies that they gain going through the boot camp that they can take direct to workforce?
I think the answer is yes, for a lot of reasons. We are using industrial quality equipment throughout the training.
Okay.
They learn to interface with a controller, and if you've learned one controller, you can usually figure out others.
Sure.
So I think all of those things are going to position you either, to become CNC machinist or related. But even if that's not what you choose, when you know how to make things, you're better at all the other events that surround manufacturing,
right,
including design.
Yep.
So we've had graduate students from engineering programs who took it because they said, I just want to know how to do this,
right,
to fill up my toolbox so that I can be better at what I do.
And let me give you an example. Early on in COVID, all of a sudden you're stuck at home. We're in a business where just about everything we do is in person. We're in front of people. We're building relationships, and all of a sudden, 30 years of doing that, and somebody's saying, no, you can't go shake somebody's hand anymore. You can't walk into a school. You can't go see an industrial employer. You're going to sit here and look at the water heater in your basement for the next 90 days. What are you going to stay busy with? So we had to be really intentional, both as business leaders and getting people thinking about how they spent their time to keep them focused and keep them value added. But also had to come up with creative ways to fill that time. And one of the things that we did was we had our whole team go through a series of credentials, in this case from the Smart Automation Certification Alliance, included quite a bit of CNC, by the way. And it was 2 full courses, 40 hours of e-learning, an exam at the end, and then you get a certification, assuming you pass the exam. I wrote a magazine column for Gardner Business Media earlier this year, maybe a year and a half ago. Melissa will edit that right out of the discussion. And I went into what is the benefit of earning a certification. I said that would have made me a better executive had I earned that, 30 years ago? Are you seeing that from some of the folks that maybe come to this a little later in their career?
Yes. I think we've had we've had over 150 students go through the in-person training. We haven't had a single student who started it that didn't finish it. And the outcomes, have been everything from now I know how to do my job better to now I know what I want to do next.
Right.
So I think the intent for us to say we're inclusive and we want to let people think next about what the next education step is. We position you for an apprenticeship, position you for a 2-year school. Maybe now I want to study engineering in college and I didn't know that before.
Right.
I think we talk about having on-ramps and off-ramps.
Right.
And I think this has been successful in doing that without a big time commitment. 6 hours plus 1 week could change your entire trajectory.
Absolutely. Well, and you think about those a lot of times we think about huge career choices, huge decisions. What technical college am I going to go to? Am I going to go on to a 4-year university? Am I going direct to workforce? Those are really, really important choices that can influence the whole future of your life. But you can make much smaller choices that do exactly the same thing. So did you say 130 students now that have been through the program?
Over 150 in person.
Over 150. So,
yeah.
So 150 students who have been positively influenced toward careers in CNC machining. So when you're sitting down with these students and talking, lots of great careers in manufacturing, you suggested, we maybe want to get into design engineering. Maybe we're a metal fabricator. Maybe we're a welder, electromechanical technician. Lots and lots of different routes. When you sit down with these students and talk about careers in machining, talk about subtractive manufacturing, being a CNC machinist, a CNC machine operator, what is it about that career that students should think about as they're considering their career choice?
I think one of the things that it could be lost, that needs to be emphasized, is if you've had the experience of spending a day making something,
right,
you will think that you accomplished something that day. That's true for me as well. A day in the laboratory, at the end of the day, I always feel like I had a positive day, whereas I could spend an entire day on Zoom or team meetings,
right,
which is still important,
right,
but at the end of the day, I'm not sure I accomplished as much.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the things both of my kids, I've got 2 kids, and one of the things we said is, you can do whatever you think you want to do when you get out of high school, but you're going to at least experience manufacturing. We want that to be on your radar. And I told them for a couple different reasons. One of them was that I wanted them to meet the amazing people that work in the shops and factories across the United States. And a lot of times, if you haven't worked in manufacturing, you lose sight of how incredible the talent on the manufacturing floor is. And these are regular people. They drive cars like we do. They raise families like we do. They went to school like we did, whatever. But just amazing people that work across the United States in the world of manufacturing. I wanted my kids to know what those people were like, and both of them do. The second one is I wanted them to know what it's like to look over your shoulder at the end of the day at a pile of parts, sitting in a bin, sitting on a dock, sitting on the back end of a machining center, whatever it is, and be able to look at those parts and say, I made that, and I had a part in making that, and it sounds like that's a big part of the message that you're sending as well.
It is, and I had that experience in high school. You always have summer jobs. One summer I worked in a cabinet shop.
Okay.
And I made cabinets.
Yeah.
And that was probably my most enjoyable summer,
awesome,
right, as a teenager, because at the end of every day, there were things that were done and going out the door. And that was probably my first experience with manufacturing and really set the stage.
Yeah, I actually spent some time for a while in a waterbed factory, believe it or not, back when the waterbed was a thing. I don't even know that people buy those anymore, but I packaging parts in a waterbed factory. I remember working temp jobs in manufacturing as well for a while I was going through college, and you had 2 or 3 weeks in the middle of a school year. Nobody's going to hire you for a full-time job for 2 or 3 weeks, so you go temp out at a manufacturing company and learn tremendous amounts of things. And that's really what in many ways inspired me toward manufacturing. Right. That and the fact that I love working with my hands. Like I said, I'm a hands-on kinesthetic learner. I struggled in the classroom, but once I got into manufacturing, I excelled. It's really a great place for individuals, regardless of where from they come. And credit to you and to ACE for the opportunities you're creating for these students, over 150 of them now. Over how long have you been at this?
Last summer and this summer were the 2 boot camp trials that we've run. The online portion is about 2 years now.
Okay.
And we have almost 3,000 online participants in CNC machining.
Incredible.
Over 500 in metrology.
Yeah. Think about how many lives you've touched. That's really
I know.
Impressive.
There's nothing I enjoy more than hearing what people learned and seeing how they carried that forward into their own, their own network.
Exactly right. That's it. I look at it the same way. It's just you look at the lives that you're able to influence and the careers that you're able to influence for the better, and that really is the most rewarding part of my job, whether it's somebody that I'm working with in one of our companies or it's a student that we've managed to influence through the technology that we bring to market. It's the best part of the job, so I absolutely love it. Speaking of technology and bringing technology to market, here we are at the International Manufacturing Technology Show. Had an opportunity to walk around, see some incredible technologies. There's still a lot of this show that I've yet to see, and if people haven't been here, it's hard to wrap your brain around just how huge this show, the International Manufacturing Show is, the technology show is. So I'm sure you've had, we talked a little bit, you've been kind of down here in the Smartforce Student Summit like I have, and so maybe not as much time interacting with the rest of the show, but I'm sure you've seen some interesting technologies. As you spent some time, Tony, walking around, what's the most interesting thing you've seen?
As a CNC machining guy, and that's where I've spent my career,
Yep.
Initially when additive manufacturing burst onto the scene, I was a bit skeptical.
Yeah,
Right? And I
right.
say, I can machine that. Why would
Exactly,
you do
right.
it any other
Yeah.
way? But it is a viable technology now. I did have some time to go through the additive manufacturing portion of the show, and I'm so impressed by how that technology has grown in such a rapid fashion.
Yeah, no, you and me both, and it's interesting to hear that answer because I would just tell you, and I was the same way, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, when we started to see 3D printing adopted in high schools. In fact, I'll tell you a story, you'll get a kick out of this. I was CEO of a manufacturing company. We had a decent-sized plant in Wisconsin, one in Indiana, and one in Iowa. And we would get requests all the time from the local high schools to, help us fund our STEM program, help us fund our technical education program. And I said, well, we're interested, but let's take a look at what you're doing. I want to understand how you're inspiring students and so on. And I go into the local high school, and the first thing they did was take me to the 3D printing lab. And they had 6 printers. They were printing out these little Star Wars figures, and really all the kids were doing. And it was fine, but they were downloading an STL file from the internet and they were putting it out to a printer and printing this little figurine. And I said, "That's awesome. What do you think? That's great. It's really impressive. That let's go see your manufacturing program." And they were like, "That is our manufacturing program." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, guys. We're working with industrial robotics. We're working with industrial CNC machines, conveyors, process control, powder coating. All these technologies that I'd worked around all these years." And I'm like, no wonder we're not inspiring anybody to get into manufacturing. The one thing that's turned is the fact that I think we are doing a much better job now of exposing young people to authentic manufacturing and industrial technology when they're in middle school and high school. But the other thing that you would hear from people during that period of time, and I had the same opinion, it's like 3D printing is cool, but we're not using that in manufacturing. And literally I had seen 2 3D printers to that point. One was at Harley-Davidson, buried like 3 levels of security clearance deep in their product development program, and the other one was at Mercury Marine, and it was the same thing, and that's where we saw them. And now here we are 6-8 years later, and there really is a belief on my part that additive has come of age, that it's not an either or. We're seeing people 3D print products and then machine them afterwards, all this post-processing, and I'm no longer intimidated by it. I'm no longer skeptic. It is here to stay. And we're looking forward to the future. As we look forward to that future, Tony, and one last question for you here on the Tech Ed podcast, and it's one I teed up a little while ago, one that we ask all of our guests here on the Tech Ed podcast. You spend time with all kinds of students, right? You've got this great job at the University of Tennessee-Knoxville. You're doing all this great work with ACE. You're exposed to students of all ages. So let's think about that 15, 16-year-old high school student, a high school sophomore, thinking about their next step, thinking about what comes next. What advice would Tony have for that 15 or 16-year-old kid?
Yeah, if I think back to my own 15 or 16-year-old self, which makes you cringe a little bit,
Yeah.
What I was somebody who I enjoyed school, I enjoyed athletics, and liked math and science. And so I was naturally, because of that, routed toward engineering.
Right.
However, I think that it's not always the case that we point people in the direction of manufacturing, as a subset of engineering, because we make assumptions about what they should be doing.
Right.
And I think that has led to a lack of diversity in manufacturing.
For sure.
That needs to be addressed right now. So the first thing I would say is I would talk to more types of students about manufacturing than maybe has been historically done.
Sure.
And the other thing is I would talk to their parents.
Yep, absolutely.
We always talk about the students.
Yep.
But I remember being 15 or 16. I like to think of myself as an autonomous grown-up person.
Right.
I was not.
We all know better, right?
And my parents still had a big hand in what I ultimately ended up doing. And so unless they're in that conversation, we're not going to get what we want.
Absolutely. So reaching more and more students, and students that maybe historically hadn't been thinking about STEM, hadn't been thinking about engineering, hadn't been thinking about CNC machining or electromechanical technology or what have you. And then also, to your point, reaching out to those parents. I'm a believer, by the way, that if you can get a kid excited enough about manufacturing, eventually the parents will come along if you can get to those parents as well. And that's exactly what you're saying. When my kids, and they're a little bit older now, but when they were making decisions about what came after high school, I said there's really two things. There's two rules. Number one is find a job that you love, something you're going to love going to work and doing every day. And number two, you're not coming home and living in my basement. So do whatever it is that you want to do after high school. We'll support it. We'll help you find a way to do that. But you got to get yourself launched into a career. But I also wanted them to be happy. And so if we can get a student that comes home and says, look, I want to be a CNC machinist, and here's why. And then mom and dad look at that, and they can realize that you can get half of your associate degree done while you're still in high school, sometimes even all of it, be a year out of high school, almost no, if any, college debt, with a career that pays you $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, drive any pickup truck you want. What parent wouldn't want that for their kids? So I think you make some really great, pose some really great advice, and make some great suggestions, Tony, for that high school student, which is, let's reach as many of them as we can, and let's reach our parents and secure the American dream for the next generation by creating this next generation of workforce talent. It's exactly what you're doing at ACE, exactly what you're doing on this, I don't want to say the back end of your career per se, but certainly after the rising to the level comes, and now you're giving back, and really appreciate you not just giving back to your students in your community, but giving back to us here on the Tech Ed Podcast.
My pleasure. This has been a great week. I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy you're here as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.